The biggest problem in security that remains unsolved is unprotected attack paths that allow threats to compromise vulnerable targets in the cloud and data center. But traditional microsegmentation is too complex and time-consuming. There's a better approach: Edgewise Zero Trust Auto Segmentation. Edgewise is impossibly simple microsegmentation, delivering results immediately with a security outcome that's provable and management that's zero touch. Driven by machine learning, Edgewise automatically builds policies that protect any application in any cloud without any changes to your network. They provide measurable improvement by quantifying attack path risk reduction and verifying software identity before it communicates to stop application compromises and data breaches. To see how to eliminate your network attack surface, visit securityweekly.com/Edgewise. Let the team at Black Hills Information Security test your defenses. With over 10 years of experience in penetration testing, red teaming, and threat hunting, the testers at Black Hills will help you find the holes in your security before the bad guys do. The team at Black Hills cares about educating and sharing their knowledge by creating countless blogs, open source tools, and webcasts for you to learn more about the tradecraft of pen testing and red teaming. Visit securityweekly.com/VHIS to join their mailing list and view the latest blogs and webcasts from Black Hills Information Security. Qualys is introducing a new prescription for security, and it's free: Global IT Asset Discovery and Inventory. Activate it today at securityweekly.com/Qualys so you can achieve 100% near real-time visibility across your hybrid environments. Well, welcome everyone. We are here. It's Black Hat 2019, Day 2. And I am here with Roman Sannikov. He's the Director of Analyst Services for Recorded Future. Roman,
Pleasure.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I was having fun talking about your background. I just kind of would just continue on that.
Sure.
We were talking about a D-Link exploit, Joel's backdoor, one of my favorite ones to talk about. And your background's interesting. You are a translator.
I was.
For the FBI.
So I kind of got into security in a somewhat non-standard way. I'm not from the technical route that most people do. I was a translator for the FBI for over 20 years. And around the year 2000, there was the first case I worked on was actually a blackmail case of then not even the mayor yet, but it was Michael Bloomberg by a Russian-speaking hacker out of Kazakhstan. And it was a very interesting case. And we got to travel to Kazakhstan as part of the investigation and really investigate the individuals who wound up hacking into the Bloomberg terminals at the time.
Well, how did you learn Russian?
I was actually born in Russia.
Oh, okay.
And then I wound up getting a degree when I was here at the University of Albany.
That's awesome.
So it's really interesting. But once I had that experience, I kind of got hooked and worked on a lot of cases. They've really varied over time. Initially, there was a lot of just plain hacking because the security was so poor that pretty much anybody could get into pretty much anything. Then I think around the mid-aughts, you started seeing a lot more social engineering because I think some of the security was improving, but a lot of the customer service really wasn't used to the idea of the social engineering. And so you kind of saw that. And then as the end of the 2000-aughts, then you really started seeing some more sophisticated, the exploit packs, exploit kits, and the smarter criminals kind of coming onto the scene.
No, that's kind of very accurate, actually. Yeah, that's awesome. So what do you do for Recorded Future today?
So for Recorded Future, I'm their analyst of I'm the director of Analyst Services, otherwise known as Analyst on Demand. And what that is that obviously Recorded Future is an extensive platform that our clients have access to, but anytime that they need any additional information, additional help, additional research, they reach out to our analyst.
So like if I find something and I'm like, this looks kind of interesting, but I need to know more, they come to you and your team and go, can you research this threat or this attack vector or this campaign or whatever it is, right? Or these threat actors.
Exactly. Some of our clients, we have a very wide range of clients. Some of our clients have, a CTI department that's maybe 2 or 3 people. So obviously they don't have the ability to really delve deeply into every threat or alert that
they can't spend days on one particular thing. Yeah, that's nice.
So that's one of the fun things.
The notes here said spread of disinformation, which piques my interest. What's this, you got to tell me the story behind
Sure.
this.
So that's one of the things that we've been doing a lot of research on. Obviously, over the course of the last few years, everybody's heard about social media manipulation, disinformation campaigns, all of that kind of stuff.
Well, and very directly tied to Russia and the whole election.
Absolutely.
Definitely shined a spotlight on that, right? Yeah.
One of the things that we've been focusing on is that even though that's become something that the West has focused on over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, in reality, a lot of this has been going on for quite some time. Some of the threat actors that we've actually engaged with and spoken with have told us that they've been doing something similar going back to 2004, 2005.
Interesting.
Primarily not targeting the West. A lot of this was done in former Soviet Union countries, Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, places like that. But a lot of these groups, these kind of, as I like to call them, mom and pop organizations, and they are, they'll call themselves Black SEO, and so they'll frequently use similar tactics that they've used over the years for search engine optimization and manipulating search engine results to really translate that to social media and to manipulate social media and to including obviously taking over accounts, creating fake accounts, large numbers of fake accounts, and also manipulating legitimate users through things like click trading, for example. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Click trading, no.
It's kind of a fun topic where if you have people on social media, I think it's predominantly done, again, in Eastern Europe and former Soviet Union, although I think we've seen some of it done in the West as well. But say you want to promote something on social media, you have a small business or something like that, you can sign up with this company that really has both a and kind of official website, looks like it's legitimate, and then does some rather nefarious things as well. But you can sign up with this company and say, hey, what they will tell you is if you click on these things or repost or retweet, you do some of these things for our clients, you will get points that you can then spend to promote your own things. So it makes it a lot harder for...
because they're using actual people.
Exactly. These are actual,
like
legitimate... Exactly. That's what it is.
That's
really...
And I also think it's tough to know who's actually behind. I mean, you may say, with your experience, you may say, well, this Russian actor did XYZ, but who hired that hacker?
Exactly.
Who funded them? Getting that information is sometimes, I mean, how do you know if it's reliable? If they say, well, I was hired by XYZ country or nation state, do you believe them? And we'll never truly know, right? Yeah.
To some extent, you have to look also at the result, at what's being done
and who benefited from
benefits.
that.
Exactly. And then you correlate that with some of the things that you hear from the threat actors. And that's one of the other things that's kind of some of the fun stuff that my team does is a lot of our clients, they'll do their own research and they'll get to a point where even if they're looking at things that we've collected from forums, it's still relatively open, and then they'll get to kind of a wall where you need to actually reach out to the threat actor and
I was going to say, you need an insider.
Exactly.
In a reverse sense, right? You need to be an insider. And obviously, I don't want you to disclose any information, about that. But that makes sense. That you can have that capability, so that enterprises don't need to take that risk, right? And that makes a lot of sense.
And that's one of the things that a lot of the clients that we speak with will say that either again they don't have the wherewithal to do that. You need language skills. You need all sorts of, or even if they do, they don't. Again, like you said, they don't want to take on the potential liability of interacting with some of these threat actors.
Yeah, because retaliation, I'm sure, as you can attest to, is probably a real thing, right?
Retaliation, also, there's always the risk of, you'll ask for some sort of sample or something, and it may be something that you didn't expect.
Yeah, maybe some extra goodies in there.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you really have to be very careful about, and, it makes sense to have a specialized group that's focusing on that as opposed to something in your own enterprise.
When you look at the underground, and it's here in the notes, I'm very interested on this. What's what's the most purchased malware or types of malware that are being bought and sold on the underground today?
Sure. So what we've really seen recently is a resurgence, so to speak, of ransomware. Obviously, ransomware has been around for quite some time. You know, we go back to scareware, we go back to all sorts of funky things, and then
we've traced it all the way back from the first malware. We interviewed someone that had done some of that research.
That's got to be really fun. But I remember even with some of the work that I did with the Bureau, we had at the time we had some collaborative work with Russian law enforcement. And they brought to us and said, hey, this was again back around 2008, 2009. They said, we have a huge problem with scareware, with things that are being, the pop-ups that are freezing up computers. And so this goes back, over 10 years.
I'm really excited to ask this question. I'm stumbling my words because I'm so excited, and you're the perfect person to answer this. So I've been reading articles, obviously, about ransomware and how it's gaining in popularity. I also look at municipalities, specifically in the U.S., cities, towns, and states. We've seen a number of them fall victim to ransomware. I've seen articles that said that attackers are going after state and local governments. Now, they've speculated on the motivation. Some will say it's for profit, right? Because a lot of these cities and towns actually do pay. Some will say it's not for profit, that's just a front, that they're trying to basically disrupt the way things work in the U.S. and use it as a scare tactic, as you mentioned. What's your opinion?
Honestly, it's a combination. For example, if we look at the NotPetya ransomware that did so much damage, I think it's to this day, it's one of the most destructive situations going back a couple of years. NotPetya was actually reviewed on one of the top Russian-speaking forums, Exploit, a few months prior to kind of being put out into the wild. Back then it was still called Petya. The review was basically, this is pretty good ransomware, but it's really useless because there's almost no way to pay the ransom. So the review was quite negative because they were looking at it as ransomware, as a monetizing way. And obviously, when it was released into the wild, relatively quickly we realized that they were never meant to pay ransom, that it was really a disruptive service. Although, a funny story, people still figured out a way to make money off of it because there were people who would then weaponize it to destroy evidence. So there were cases, I remember, in Ukraine where companies that were being investigated by domestic law enforcement they reached out to, I don't remember the individual's name, he was later prosecuted, but he would infect them to get rid of any potential evidence that was, and they would say, hey, we'd love to hand over all of these things
but
to
we
you.
fell victim to an attack.
Exactly. We got nothing left,
to tell you.
But getting back to your question, I think it really is a combination of the two things. Ransomware is a funny thing. It's actually pretty unpopular with certain people in the community, people who consider themselves to be really the more elite hackers, sophisticated, because obviously it's incredibly noisy. It kills your infrastructure. It kills your
traffic. It puts everyone on high alert, right? Because now they're going to look for any signs of malware in there, right? So I can see
all of the traffic that you were using, all the exploit kits that you may have been using,
you're basically
all the
burning all of your,
all
your
of
tools and infrastructure.
So there were actually some moves or some proposals on some of the major Russian language forums to ban it altogether for two reasons. One reason was for actually, believe it or not, they had moral qualms to it. They were saying, hey, how would you feel if your grandma is in the hospital and all of a sudden the hospital shuts down? So there were some bad guys who were coming out and saying that, but a lot of them were predominantly concerned with the fact that it was destroying all the infrastructure that they had spent so much time setting up for their theft of credentials.
Not to mention shining a spotlight on some of their tools and techniques and actors as well, right? And there's
there's a company, I think it's in Tesla, right, that looks at the
Yep.
signatures behind the
Integer.
malware.
Yep.
So I can see
Yep.
the sophisticated
Yep.
hacker going like,
Integer, yeah.
some of my code like ended up
Exactly.
in this ransomware, and now it's noisy. Now everyone in the security community is reverse engineering it, and it's going to get tied back to me, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when you saw the spike in cryptocurrencies about a year and a half ago, you saw a big shift from ransomware to crypto miners.
Yeah.
Because even though they are noisier than malware, they're a lot less noisy than ransomware.
Right, right.
So you kind of had a ransomware, I think, had a substantial decline over that time.
Right.
But the problem with kind of trying to combat ransomware is that it is such an easy thing for people who have virtually no skills to use. It's really, the ransomware as a service.
Right.
You
Well, 'cause you don't have to worry about being stealthy.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Well, and also you don't have to. Literally, you invest in you buy the ransomware as a service. You go, you buy some traffic, you buy some this, some that, and
So
you have to know
like
almost nothing. Absolutely.
And DDoS is pretty similar in being noisy.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
like that.
And really compromising a lot of the infrastructure and the same way as ransomware. But the fact that you've seen this resurgence, I think, shows that it's a lot more targeted because they are targeting entities that will pay because they have little option about whether to pay or not. At the same time, you do see them targeting a lot of public sector entities, which, like you said, is very disruptive, more disruptive than targeting private sector.
Right.
So ostensibly, if you think about it, if you hit some sort of wealthy, conglomerate, you probably would be able to get more than you could from a small municipality. And yet, they are hitting a lot of the municipalities. So I think that goes to your point that there are probably a lot of even more nefarious kind of motivation behind what they're doing and why they're doing
disruptive,
it.
right? Yeah. It's interesting.
That goes to the disinformation campaigns that we're following. Is they're called influence campaigns, but I think specific influence is really a secondary motivation. I think the primary motivation is really to disrupt, to just engender friction, to engender chaos. If you accept the kind of the hypothesis that I think most people accept, that a lot of this is being done by people who are tied to the Russian government and other governments that are not super friendly to the United States and to the West, it plays into their hands when people domestically can see something that looks very chaotic and very unappetizing happening in the West, be it mobs, be it all sorts of things that they see as threatening.
And that's been going on specifically with Russia since like legit the beginning of time of like when the countries were established, right?
Yes.
There's always been disinformation campaigns. Now it's just taking the form in the cyber realm.
Absolutely. It's funny that you bring that up, but for example, during the Soviet times, there were certain very well-known actors and musicians from the U.S. who were very popular in the former Soviet Union, and they would specifically bring them in and talk about, for example, if they were African American, they would talk about how discriminated they were and really use them as a way to put down and to denigrate the United States and the West in general.
Right. Exactly. Similar how social media can be a voice.
And that's something that, in a sense, like you said, that's being repeated right now. It's just that they can really amplify it by social media, because social media doesn't have those the same checks that more mainstream media used to have.
Right. Are there reports or places you want to point people to for Recorded Future to learn more information about what your team gathers, you publicize?
Sure. We're actually about to put out a report specifically on disinformation. This one's going to be a little bit different from what I was talking about because we're focusing a little bit more on the private sector. Most of the discussion about disinformation right now is focused on things like election meddling and the various referendums and things like this. We want companies to understand that there are tools and that there are threat actors that are willing to target them for a price, willing to target them on all sorts of social media, put out fake stories in both in social media and in more traditional media about these companies for a price. I like to, it's probably not a perfect equivalent, but I like to compare this kind of disinformation and to the DDoS of maybe 2010, where you saw little mom and pop shops all of a sudden DDoSing their competitors, down the block, because it was so easy, it was so inexpensive, and it was effective. Fortunately, DDoS is less effective now. I think you have to really try to, and you have various mitigation techniques. Disinformation doesn't really have much mitigation yet. We really haven't figured out how to effectively do that. So if all of a sudden you're a private company and there's a flood of negative publicity that is, again, hitting social media and then potentially is being reported in mainstream media as a phenomenon, it becomes this loop. Exactly. And then you really have to figure out how to deal with that. And again, what we're trying to say is that companies have to be very cognizant and really monitor these networks that are tied into this disinformation, because if they don't, by the time they realize the negative publicity,
it's may be too late. So folks can visit the Recorded Future website and find these reports. Can you say Security Weekly is awesome in Russian?
Absolutely. Security Weekly, потрясающий подкаст. Всем надо его слушать.
Thank you so much, Roman.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. We're here at Black Hat 2019, day 2, rounding out day 2, almost, sort of. I don't know. I've lost all track of time.
Tail end of day 2.
Time has no boundaries here, apparently. I'm excited for our interview today. Ray DeMeo is the Chief Operating Officer at Virsec.
That's correct.
Ray, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes. Julian always seems to sneak on to a lot of different segments. This is his second interview at a Black Hat conference. You've been on Paul Security Weekly. It's nice to have you back, Julian. For our audience, introduce your full name and title, please.
Sure.
Because for some reason, I don't have it in front of me.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, Julian Zottel. I work for Raytheon as a cyber and information operations subject matter expert.
Now, Julian, you're still working, obviously, with the Virsec folks on a lot of projects for your customers at Raytheon.
We are, yeah. That's a continual thing. I mean, Ray and I have known each other for a number of years, and most recently, actually, it's funny, a lot of times we introduce his product to help customers out and things like that. But for the first time, I think we're actually working on the same project, which is amazing.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So I want to get a little update on the product. And we talk about runtime application memory protection, right? That's a mouthful. Which is it go on the operating system, Windows, Linux, Mac OS? And does it matter what the application is? I guess it's a good start.
Yeah, sure. Great. So it doesn't matter. So firstly, anything x86.
Okay.
So Windows family, Linux, Unix family. It's not
Mac OS yet, or
not. Yeah, not yet.
Okay. I mean, that's fair. When we're talking about, I don't think it's
focused. We're focused on servers, protecting server workloads.
Yep. Okay.
We get asked all the time, "Oh, can you do endpoints?" Could, but it's really about bandwidth, about where do you spend your time. And
so the operating
try to do this one thing really well.
The operating systems, Windows and Linux, that are running applications in a production environment, right?
Exactly.
To serve users, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Awesome. Right. That's good. And so when in containers, that's where I wanted to go next. Sorry, it's been a long day. I've done a container deployment. I love working with containers. It's great to see adoption grow. When I first started, it was kind of on that cusp of, will containers be a thing here to stay? And
that was about 9 months ago.
Yeah, right.
now it's everywhere.
So containers are here to stay, and now I feel like everyone should be asking the question, how do I protect my containers? But I think more people need to be asking that. So obviously you run inside of a container environment.
Perfect question. So we protect the workload. So really, whether it's on bare metal, whether it's on a VM, or whether it's in a container, right? The protection travels with that workload.
Right.
So this is what Gartner was highlighting in that their market guide for workload protection.
Yep.
So that's it. That it's the portability of it, and it's this essential need to be able to protect no matter where it resides.
I don't like the word agent. For a lot of reasons, right? I think people have too many preconceived notions about the word agent. But I'm assuming you have to put some type of software or hook onto a container or a system, right? Yeah, no one likes the word agent, right?
We call it a probe, and for this reason, we're not using any appreciable amount of memory or CPU within that workload. The whole idea is then to offload that to a separate analysis engine expressly for that purpose, right? So that you have minimal, low single-digit overhead, if any. And so that's what's important.
I think there's a real distinction. We've already made it between endpoints and workloads, right?
Sure.
And I think an endpoint agent has a completely different context versus I update my Docker file with one line and then I've got your hook and I'm off to the races, right? To me, that's not really that's not an endpoint agent, right?
True, for sure. It's amazing, however, what we see in some data center environments, the amount, that total amount of CPU that's taken by many legacy things, agents. I'll use that word. That are added. So how do you get that off? So it's a good thing, right? As we move forward to this container world, hopefully that whole world will start to shift and be far more efficient. So we're excited.
So how does it help protect my, in this case, container? It doesn't matter what it's running on. I'm just selfishly asking about containers.
So what we're doing, right? We're able to map the DNA, right? We're able to map the binaries of code, and then once we do that at boot or at the instantiation of that instance, and then as you go into run, then we're tracking that, right? We're able to see function call by function call. Is it going where it's supposed to go? Is it staying on the map, or is some threat actor trying to force that code to go in a bad location? So because of that, you need to be able to protect no matter where it resides.
Right.
And so whether, I guess the answer to that is it's the same, right? Whether it's on bare metal or whether it's in a container. Yet, as we move into the container world, they're being spun up more quickly. They're being spun up more broadly in a much wider arc of distribution. So it's important, and maybe more important, and harder to do, if I'll say it this way, than it's been in the past at any time in the past.
Yeah, I was just going to add one thing to that. It's kind of interesting when you think about it, like applications run in containers and stuff, right? So, you could spin up 5 instances or you could spin up 1,000, right? And with a product like Virsec, they'll all be protected, which is kind of interesting.
So it's the protection, right? You're going to stop that code execution.
Correct.
Okay, that's awesome.
That's right.
Awesome.
It's detect and protect, right?
Yeah.
This is the
new world we live in now. Believe me, I think that's one theme that I've gleaned. You're lucky to be at this stage in the Black Hat. One thing I've gleaned is most that came on the show talked about how protection is the game now. Like detection's great, but if we got 1,000 containers, great that I can detect they're all being, someone's breaking into all of them. Awesome. I need to protect it because I can't.
Too late. You've been compromised.
Yeah, exactly. So,
and we were actually talking a little bit earlier about that. There are instances where you want you can stop it in IPS mode, so to speak, right? You want to stop the process, etc. Or sometimes you want to let it go on.
Right.
To investigate what it's doing, or maybe making calls out to the internet or whatever, because if we can do that now, if we stop the process because we see it's malicious, okay, that's good. If we stop a process after it's made DNS calls and things like that, now we can implement the protections at the borders because we know what it's going after.
Right.
Yeah.
So when it's looking at the function calls, and how is it determining good versus bad?
So we map the code itself, right? We're able to map the binaries. We're able to, our IP is essentially our ability to know just by looking at the binaries, what is a function call, and therefore, if we know all of them in a piece of code, then we can also understand at runtime if they're being forced, or if execution is being forced to jump into a
Do
place
something
where
different.
it's not supposed to go.
Right.
So
Now,
that's at the most primitive description. But
you
but
can
then
use
it
the
goes
word
well
machine
beyond
learning. It's okay. We don't deduct any points from using machine learning. But like, do you have maps of like known good, or do you build the map and then put that off on the cloud?
So we build it instantaneously, and it's this, right? If you say, well, gee, okay, baseline my application or my environment on a good day. Well, what's a good day, right? We've seen this path, right? And then how much time does it take? Well, don't know, right? Or it takes hours or days.
Looking inside the code to build the map, and then looking at variances from that.
So that's not our world, right? Our world is to be able to build that map within a couple of seconds or less as you initiate that application.
I gotcha.
So as you boot or initiate that application, we can make that instantaneously. And so why is that important? That's important because you're making sure that what's running is actually the code that's been mapped.
Oh, I
it's
see.
not
Yeah,
some
you
older
don't want to
revision.
store it because you won't get the current snapshot.
Right.
Especially with containers, it can change
For sure.
every minute.
For sure.
Yeah.
So this is about certainly speed, right? How do you know the moment something jumps return-oriented programming, some form of ROP-JOP type of attack? We started out, we looked at that bright red line on the National Vulnerability Database, these memory exploits, and said, we got to stop that. That's our mission. That's what this company is going to be about. Because as we set out to do that, we also then quickly became able to cover much broader portion of that entire National Vulnerability Database.
Is it just memory exploitations in a traditional sense, or is it other manipulations that are just due to configuration? In Linux, for example, right? There's been a lot of recent attacks where file permissions and other things get me execution, but I'm not necessarily like doing a buffer overflow, for example.
So we've since added process monitoring, file system monitoring. We're able to also look at interpreted code as well. So there's a number of additional capabilities. But I come back to the core, right? Where grassroots, where did it come from? And it's about this ability to map the binaries from start. And map what is legitimate behavior. And so therefore it's not this, gee, I've got to learn and I've got to baseline over a period of time. Gee, I baselined on Friday, Monday morning, baseline's off. Right. There's solutions like that, and we know in those environments where customers certainly and prospects that we talk to say, "Gee, I don't enable protection because, gee, it's out of date, or I can't be sure that it's the same thing that we wanted to happen when we first ran the baseline."
Right. Yeah. So, assuming like command execution in my web app, that would probably flag, right? Because it doesn't.
Exactly.
This function normally doesn't like step out and execute a shell. It never has done that. In the code, it doesn't say it should do that, essentially.
Right, and actually earlier I was in one of the demos. I hadn't seen the newest version, and so we were checking out the newest version, and one of the things they did was drop a file on the web server itself remotely, and it picked it right up.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
okay.
That's, perfect example. Not an in-memory thing.
Right,
but it's obviously odd behavior.
I mean, don't get me wrong. We still see, as you mentioned, a ton of memory attacks, kernel-level attacks, things of that nature, but we also have the ones I always like that didn't rely on that because memory is very volatile, right? The more reliable ones for me as a pen tester are always the abusing a configuration or some other way to get execution that didn't involve memory.
So we've broadened our capability. Great example. Glad you could see those.
The
some of
demos
those
earlier.
later. We always like to bring our latest and greatest demos and show as many people. And of course, Julian can talk deep with our team on how do we do it. And you showed us some of yours too, which was impressive. Yeah, so the team liked to see some of his own exploits that he's built.
Oh, nice. Yeah. And did it catch you? There's always a cat and mouse game, right?
We didn't try that. Okay. I was like, oh, this looks like an exploit, that I may or may not have developed at some point,
Right.
And I was like, oh, here it is, and they were like, oh, that's cool, and so maybe we'll try it out.
We can talk shop like that.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome.
That's great.
So what's the customer experience like? Is it and when do they implement it? Is you usually like post-breach or pre-breach, or like when you drop it in, like what's the thing they're like, oh my God, I would have never gotten this anywhere else. This is wonderful. Like what's the reaction?
Well, ideally for everyone, right? It's pre-breach, right? We have conversations where someone's been breached and they don't want it to happen again.
Right.
So you look at, so one of the things we're able to do, of course, at the same time, is also see, where did this breach take place? How did it happen? If they've captured the malware, or if they've, and we've been asked from some of the people we both know, gee, can you look at this? This was being used to take down a piece of critical infrastructure or some pretty important system. We've looked at it and said, here's how this works in our environment. And then the conversation goes forward. Let's do a POC. Let's do a pilot. Let's throw that same or others that are similar that we've known target those kinds of environments. And it's a powerful and compelling result that comes from that. So people are excited, because of this ability to see real time. Then number 2, automation. This ability to then within a very short period of time, right before a threat actor can exfiltrate data, before they can take down a system, we can then throw a protection action. And then finally, it's this ability to have seen a 0 days, have seen something that's either known or hasn't been patched,
right.
Either unknown or has not been patched. And so that's very compelling as well, because so many people are worried about, we'll always say patch, right? Eat your broccoli, do these, brush your teeth, do these health things. Yet the time window is often longer than any enterprise wants it to be, right? Before they can marshal the resources to actually do that patching or take that protective action. So we're able to do it faster.
The protective actions, what are some of the best use cases, and how flexible is it?
So it's very flexible. We have both what we characterize as micro protection actions and then macro actions. So micro protection actions, can you kill a thread, right? Can you kill a process right there at the application? Macro, can you go back to a WAF, for example, instantiate or create a rule, make that automated, as opposed to, it's going to run up, here's an alert that has to go up to a dashboard, someone has to look at it in a SIM, someone has to decide, fill out a slip or whatever, a ticket, and then make it. Way too many bad things can happen before that ever. And of course, the other use case to your question, the other use case we see is, how do you up-level the task, the workload that our precious people resources are that we're trying to hire, and we're trying to retain. They're precious, right? They're hard to. It's hard to get the skill set, and it's hard to retain. It's hard to keep them interested. So if you can now make a lot of that more immediate action automated, and then move up to here's some rich forensic evidence. Where were they trying to attack? Exactly where in the application? At what time point? Where did they originate? So to that level of visibility, you hear visibility a lot, right?
Yeah,
but
I heard it a lot this week.
Yeah. So there it is. But that's powerful, and so that the conversation also goes to how can you move that to how can you move that to up leveling the skill set and the work.
What about kind of moving stuff around based on an attack? So I take my container. Oh, there's an attack, and I can move it somewhere else. I can talk to the Kubernetes or whatever. Same thing in the cloud. Can I talk to my cloud and put rules in there or move infrastructure around based on attacks to quarantine it?
Well, this is kind of in line with some of the things you were alluding to.
Yep.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why that wouldn't be possible, especially with the advent of SOARs and all that fun stuff, right? If you kick off a process, you say, hey, look, this is attacking this section. The SOAR will be hopefully smart enough, right? To move that either around. We've seen stuff where, okay, it's deployed on Linux, et cetera, or something's running on Linux. It's attacking the OS. Let's move it to Windows, right? And now it's a different attack surface, and now it's going to take them longer, and now we can initiate better border protections before,
Is the API open so people could write those integrations if they wanted to and customize the actions that are taken?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we can. The orchestration part's really not. That's not the hard part, right? Or it's
your
good,
API
it's doable,
spits out like
flexible.
something bad is happening here, right?
Yeah.
Something just needs to catch that and go.
What do you
that means I go do this, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's really it is actually exciting when you can see the number of integrations, and we come up with ideas, but more often than not, it's the people we talk to that come up with ideas, and they're like, can
in
you
practice,
do that? It's like, yeah, we can do that. So
Yeah, earlier we were
It
talking.
keeps growing.
We were talking a little bit about a different use case, which is, can we do this for malware analysis?
Mm.
You know, if you have a process that you know really well and a piece of malware is attacking it, right? Well, their system gives us the ability, they have the binary mapped out, right? So they know where that malware hit. So might speed up malware analysis too. We were kind of playing around with that idea earlier. We're like, okay, maybe this is something we're going to investigate, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you could determine if that maps back to a known vulnerability or not a known vulnerability, because
That's
like you
right.
said, Julian,
Yeah.
you know exactly in the binary where it hit. You go back through patches and go, hold on.
That
There's no
wasn't a CVE.
Yeah, there's no CVE. There's no patch for that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yep, right. So you're covering known and unknown, of course,
Mhm.
landscape, and that's a big part of our mission.
Yep. And the dashboard that comes along with it, I'm assuming that's in the cloud, and like what does it look like? Or
We've got a dashboard. We like it. It's a lot of effort's been put into being
Mhm.
able to not only show graphically applications that are protected, applications that are under attack, and then the ability, of course, to drill down into the data behind that. So all great, yet there's plenty of dashboards out there too. So
yeah,
we
I feel like
continue to
the dashboard's the API today, right? Like it's,
So we have very useful, flexible, informative dashboard. Yet everything we make available right
Mhm.
through the API.
Mhm.
So what we do an integration with Phantom. We showed you the Phantom integration.
Yep, awesome.
Of course, but anything else,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter, right? Stix, Taxi.
Yeah,
or,
the SOAR platform is a logical place,
it's
I
all
think, to
there.
put it. Yeah, for sure.
So
for sure.
so we have an orchestration engine
Mhm.
right, that can take these protective actions ourselves, but certainly a SOAR platform could do the same.
Mm-hmm. If people want to get a trial or a demo, is there a trial or a demo? Like, how does that work? It's fine. I just like our audience to know what they can expect.
Oh, sure.
If
Yeah.
they want to try it, they're listening to this and go, I really want to try that. Like, can they go get a
Excellent.
free trial, or they have to register for a demo? Either's fine.
So you can go to our website and you can register for a demo for
Okay.
sure.
Yep.
If you want to do a trial, if someone was serious enough about saying, hey, I want to take this for a test drive, we do a couple things depending on the customer and depending on the situation. Of course, we can set up in your local environment. Additionally, we can spin up environments in our own
Mhm.
lab and have you VPN in and run whatever you want on it. So we can provide applications, we can provide exploits, you can bring your own, but we try to make it very flexible.
Mhm.
So we find, you guys have seen this, right? The hardest thing for many people is just setting up the environment.
Yeah.
So we can spin up an environment pretty quick,
Mhm.
and we can make an instance available of our application or our solution, and then a pretty wide range of applications as well. So
Awesome.
so that's so we try to make it easy. On our website, you can click Virsec.com. You can say, I want to see a demo, and then you can also, of course, fill out a form, and we can have that conversation toward doing a pilot.
Fantastic. Ray,
Yes.
Julian, thank you so much.
Thanks, been a pleasure, man.